Antonio, welcome to the Mason J Show. Today we have Antonio Pitocco on to talk about his experience running for the Maryland congressional 3rd District. Antonio, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So can you give everybody listening who may not know you just a little general background so we can get kind of the groundwork?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised here in the state of Maryland, went to Salisbury University, went to school here, grew up here, worked here. And after everything that happened with COVID, it was kind of like the catalyst for me to run for office. Right after the lockdowns happened, I lost my job. We were all laid off, like millions of Americans. And to sit there and watch our elected officials in Washington continue to receive a paycheck, to continue to, just go about their lives as normal, while the American people and businesses suffered, was incredible to watch in a way where I was just like, you know what? Enough sitting on the sidelines. I'm going to jump into this and I'm going to run for office. That's how we came to be running for the 3rd District. And it was a great process. It was a lot of fun. We got to meet a lot of incredible people across the state. Really, really, really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, the results as they stand now are not what we were expecting at all. Mm-hmm. It's only motivation for the next run, really, because what we did was an incredible building block for the next step.
And for those that might not be familiar, where is the 3rd District within Maryland?
So the 3rd District, we actually just got redistricted, the whole state. And before, it was one of the most gerrymandered districts in the entire country, which means that partisan politics, like the party in power, use that to their advantage to stay in power, to keep their congressional delegation at the 7-1, 7 Democrats, 1 Republican. People do it across the country. Republican states do it. It's a horrible form of silencing voters. But we thankfully got redistricted here in Maryland this year, right before the election, and it takes up portions of the northern portion of Anne Arundel County. It goes out to all of Howard County, and then a very small portion of Carroll. Mm-hmm.
And so you said that, during COVID, that kind of was the motivating time for you to get into this field.
Yeah.
Were there specific things in Maryland and in this district or others that really triggered you to feel like you could make a change?
I mean, it was basically like, I go back to the fact that so many people lost their jobs. Mm-hmm. So many businesses closed that never reopened. And obviously, like I've said throughout the entire campaign, our generation needs a voice in Washington. We need representation in Washington, but most importantly, we need representation that's actually going to address the issues, not just engage in party politics. Mm-hmm. That's why I got into this. I didn't want to be controlled by anyone and I've highlighted this a lot. I highlighted this a lot throughout the campaign, where different members of what we would call the establishment, the powerful people behind the scenes, they'll find a candidate that they like and they'll hand select them and they'll get them the funding and the money they need in exchange for them doing their bidding. Mm-hmm. So when it comes time to vote on a guns rights issue, when it comes time to vote on an abortion issue, they're going to come back and they're going to expect you to vote how they want you to vote. And that was never a candidate. That was never the candidate I wanted to be. Right. I was like, we're not going to go to the lobbyists. We're not going to go to the establishment. We're going to do our own thing. We came out being the most genuine campaign. We came out being the most hardworking campaign. And despite the results not being what we wanted, I still think we had a major win in the fact that we gave the people of Maryland's 3rd District a new option, a fresh option, and a fresh face in the political process.
Hey guys, going to take a quick break from the episode just to highlight a sponsor of this season of the Mason J Show. And today we have Spencer Banger, a loan officer with Fidelity Direct Mortgage, here to offer the listeners of my podcast some free knowledge and education on the home buying process, and hopefully to be your loan officer when it comes to your new home purchase or refinance of the current home you have. Spencer has been in the mortgage industry for over 8 years and run through the home buying process thousands and thousands of times, and that means that he is an absolute expert and will catch the little details that turn into big problems down the road. Spencer is offering a free consultation to any of my listeners to go over your credit and your home buying eligibility to see if you qualify for the home or refinance that you're looking for. All you have to do is send an email to spencer@fdmhome.com, reference the podcast, and that you're there for your consultation. Spencer is somebody that I absolutely trust because I've seen him work firsthand, and I wouldn't put a sponsor on the episode if it wasn't somebody or something that I think would really help you guys out. And I actually mean that. Thank you guys so much. Back to the episode. Spencer's NMLS ID is 1202142, and Fidelity Direct Mortgage's number is 1-888 29. Thanks, guys.
I agree, and I think that because how old are you?
26. I'll be 27 in September.
26, 27. So that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on, is because in my sphere of friends and like age group, and a lot of the listeners of this podcast are in the 20 to 30-year-old range. There's not a single friend or friend of a friend that I know that's making any movement or motivation to get into politics to represent the states and the towns that they grew up in. So that I thought was a big thing that I saw you doing, that I gained a lot of respect for you, because that's not something that off the top of my like things I want to do list is one of them. But I do realize how important it is that people our age get involved in that, because there's so much that our generation has to offer and to change. And you see that in everybody that's protesting and wanting change and reform to the rules and laws that are in place now. But I think the real way to make that change is for these people to, take a stand and get in office. And seeing you do that was a huge thing in my books, because it's something that not many people just want to do,
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at the way politics is right now, it's super divided. Our country is incredibly divided right now, with all the contentious bills and legislation coming out of Washington. And their whole plan, the people in power, their whole plan is to keep us divided. The longer they can keep us divided, the more time they have to, do what they want. We need fresh faces in Washington. I had someone ask me early on in the campaign, how do we change Washington? Well, we can change Washington by changing the people we send there. Because doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome, is a form of insanity. Electing the same people over and over again, expecting a different outcome, is a gross form of insanity.
Right.
It's crazy to see the same people go back, and it doesn't even have to be at the congressional level, at the federal level. Look at like the local level here in Maryland, right here in Anne Arundel County, where we have people who pretend to represent us here in Annapolis at the local level. They go out there and they tell their voters what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. They stick to their partisan talking points. They stick to the talking points handed to them by the party, and they run with it. And if it works for them, it works for them. But they're lying to people. They're lying to their voters, and that's the biggest issue we have in politics right now. There's just a lot of lying, a lot of dishonesty, a lot of things going on in the shadows that delivers a disservice to the American people overall.
So when you were getting the idea to run for office, and I want to ask this question because perhaps people listening are interested in doing the same thing but don't exactly know where to start. So how did you go from the idea of running for office to actually like executing on that and becoming a candidate for this district?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'll tell everybody out there, everybody listening, that if you want to run for office, doesn't matter if it's Congress, local level, or state level, or anything like that, do it. Because we need fresh minds going into politics. When we got into it, we started with absolutely nothing. We built, like my team and I we were incredible. I'm so proud of my team and everything that we did together, because we literally built a federal level campaign out of nothing. We started with nothing. We didn't have any resources. We didn't have like $1 million sitting in the bank like a lot of these incumbents do. We built everything from the ground up. I went and filed my paperwork at the Board of Elections in Annapolis, and then we immediately got to work. We started going to community events, to different club meetings around the district, just to start talking to people and seeing what they wanted. And the biggest thing we heard from Republicans, Democrats, and independents was, we just want a voice in Washington again. We just want to know that the people we're electing and we're sending to Washington are going to be beholden to us, because that's how our country was founded, right here. Like, I mean, we the people, that's who has the power in our country, or that's who should have the power in our country. But right now, it's a select group of corrupt and powerful individuals, and we stepped in. My campaign slogan was a new way forward. That's exactly what we wanted to give to people. We wanted to give them a new option, a fresh face, new ideas, someone that could go to Washington and actually represent them. Like I said, we weren't heavily funded by any means. We had I think it was over 300 small dollar donors, and we were able to raise the amount of money that I think a lot of people didn't expect us to. I think what we did throughout this entire process over the last year and a half, maybe a little bit more, showed a lot of people that we're coming to play, and regardless of the outcome of this election, we're not going anywhere.
Did you find that a lot of the people you were running against were out doing the same work in the field as you were? Because I know from following you on social media, you guys knocked on 10,000 doors and
Yeah.
met people face to face.
Yeah.
Was there anybody else that you were running with or against, or even in just other sectors, doing the same work on the ground?
I can say without a shadow of a doubt that in the 3rd District, we were the only campaign that can say they knocked on over 10,000 doors and made over 25,000 voter contacts. It's like that alone, like we hear the parties preach about grassroots and, going directly to someone's door. Because when you go up and you knock on someone's door, you're automatically having a personal conversation with them. You're on their property. You're there to sell yourself.
Absolutely.
So when it comes down to it, the people see that and they respect it. But what we see with the party sometimes is they preach the grassroots, on the ground, hardworking candidate, but then they back the candidate who's not willing to put in that work. You know what I mean? They get behind a candidate that they know they can control. So yeah, I would say without a shadow of a doubt, we were the most hardworking campaign. We put in the time, effort, and energy, and we did that one time. That was our first run, and we did all of that. I'm sure you saw it. We posted our how many doors we knocked this week, how many calls we made, how many emails were sent, texts were sent, this and that. Exactly what we were reaching out to people. And all of those numbers, they're not lies. I can pull it up for you right now. Like a lot of people were like, well, maybe he's bending the truth. And I'm like, we're not.
Yeah.
We're just that hardworking. We're willing to put in the work to gain the respect of voters. So we did it once. And I can guarantee you we're going to come back and we're going to do it again, and we're going to build on what we just did.
Did you get good feedback? Because I've always been curious how those conversations go when you're going and knocking on people's doors, because typically the only people that do that are, people selling like electric or,
solar panels
or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you get good feedback when you were kind of, knocking on people's doors unexpectedly and having these conversations with them, and like how did those interactions go?
Well, I will tell you, Ring doorbells have made it really hard to door knock just because people don't answer the door. They don't need to.
They see who you are.
Yeah, but the people that came to the door, and back in the beginning of the campaign, I was always concerned that we were going to get laughed out of the room for me being so young. Like, oh, you're gonna run for Congress? Cool. Like, just step aside, let someone else do it. But the reception we received overall for a young candidate, a first-time candidate, a political outsider, was incredible. And at the doors, people loved it. Like, there were times where I'd get stuck at doors for like 45 minutes talking to people.
That's great.
Whether it was, they were just voicing their concerns, voicing their opinions, or, actually like asking about me, why I got into this. But it was a great experience. I never, if you would have told me 5 years ago I'd be knocking on doors for someone to vote for me for Congress, I would have told you were crazy.
Yeah, I bet.
But, once you get out there and do it a few times, once you hit a few doors, you get used to it. And then you just crave that energy. You just keep going. Like, there were days, especially right towards the end, we were out for over 10 hours a day, knocking on doors, stopping by polling locations. And when you get people right there at the polling location before they go in to vote, they're showing up to vote. They're not showing up to just see the school gymnasium.
Right.
They're showing up to be there to vote. So when you catch someone there and you actually have that personal conversation and you get they get to see the candidate themselves, it's rewarding in a sense that you're actually getting to see the beauty behind the campaign, getting to interface with people, getting to talk to people about what they want in their government. On our literature, we had it listed out on the back, all of our policies. Those policies were we surveyed the community in the order that they thought were most important. So whether it was, bringing jobs back to America, cutting our national debt, cutting spending, all this stuff, that came from the community. That wasn't me sitting at a computer designing it myself. That was from the community. So the community wanted change. I just hope that we're able to usher in that change in the way they want it.
And so I have a question, but I want to preface it with another question to help me ask that question.
Yeah.
So for politicians that currently have positions in office and in Congress, how you were running, are there term limits for how long they can stay in those positions for?
No. So right now there's elections for the House every 2 years. And some people will say that that's a form of a term limit because, at the end of the 2 years, that person could get voted out of office and then we'll get a new person. Mm-hmm. But it's the fact that they get to serve as long as they want.
Yeah.
They don't have to leave. A lot of people don't. You see people that have been in office, especially in Congress, for over 40 years. I can tell you for a fact that those people, they don't speak for us. They don't represent us. They probably don't even care about us. They'll pretend to. But no, term limits was a major issue that we wanted to tackle. We signed the term limits pledge early on to limit terms in the House and the Senate, because if it works for the president, why can't it work for other elected officials?
As it should. And so then my follow-up question to that was was just that. It's like people that are fresh into politics, I feel, would have that boots on the ground work that you did. And however, it seems like once people get elected and then reelected and then reelected, that boots on the ground learning about what the community's needs are kind of trails off, and maybe there's a detachment from what they see sitting in office versus what the people actually need at home. And since they're not doing that door knocking, they're not interfacing with the community other than maybe social media, if they're even like paying attention to what their campaign is posting. Like there becomes like a larger and larger separation of what they think people need or what they want to push versus what the people actually need.
Absolutely. It makes them very detached from reality. One thing I told everyone was, if I were to win in November, I wouldn't be moving to DC. I'd live right here. I'd live in the district. I'd shop at the same stores, drive on the same roads, deal with the same things that the people in the community deal with, spend time with local clubs, business meetings, stuff like that, to really understand those issues. They say that your first reelection, after you've won, is your hardest one yet, because you have to prove yourself during that time and then win reelection. We've seen a lot of first-time members of Congress get taken out at the end of their first term because the voters just chose someone different. But we were always ready to be the candidate and the campaign that remained in the district, that stayed here and stood alongside the people in the community the way our representatives were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And how did you go about? I know you partnered with some of the other congressional or political members like Kim Classic. Klacik. How was your experience kind of partnering with those other political candidates? I'm actually not sure. Is she in office at the moment?
She's not running for office. I don't think she was going to run this year. I don't know when she's going to run next. I'm sure she will.
Okay.
She's great. We love her. But being able to meet so many different candidates, not just here in the state of Maryland, but from around the country. Like we met people up in New Jersey. We went out there for a few events. We met people down in Florida, California, everywhere in between. Just a bunch of different candidates. And they were all younger too. They were all first-time candidates. They've never been in elected office before. It was really great to just see like a new wave like usher in, whether we won or not. Just to like get that ball rolling was great. And being able to collaborate with a lot of these other candidates, like I talk to a lot of them still almost every day. We're just checking in, seeing how everyone's race is going, how things are going, down in Florida and stuff like that. But it was awesome being able to like have those connections with not just the community and going door knocking, but having connections with other candidates who are also dealing with other like candidate things. Mm-hmm. It was great because we would just bounce ideas off of each other. We would fly around the country to see each other, and it was great.
Do you have advice for anybody interested in getting into politics, like at our age, who haven't ran before, who are nervous or intimidated to like get into the sector, just don't know where to start?
Yeah, it's definitely an intimidating.
I would be intimidated.
Industry. Like after I filed to run, I was like, cool, I'm a candidate for federal office now. But then we went to the first few events where you're in it.
Yeah.
Like you're thrown in there, and they're announcing you as. They're like, oh, candidate for Congress in Maryland's 3rd District, Antonio Pitocco, and you're like waving to a crowded room and you're speaking to a lot of people, and it is very intimidating. But for anyone out there that's thinking about running, whether you're no matter what side of the political aisle they stand on, they should do it. I always told everyone, I'm like, get involved, whether it's for a local city council race or whether it's for a race for president of the United States. Getting involved was exactly what I did. I door knocked for Kim Klacik when she ran in Baltimore. And then I door knocked for another friend of mine down in Southern Maryland. Both were running for Congress. That was where I got to see it firsthand, like being out there in the community. And, they were both candidates that they never held public office before. They weren't elected to public office before, but they were passionate about the community they lived in mm-hmm. and the district they lived in. And I was like, you know what? I was like, it's my turn. And that's when we got into it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
What makes you proud to live and support like the Annapolis area in the 3rd District?
I was born and raised here. I grew up here. I've been here my whole life, and I love it here. Quite honestly, I love the state of Maryland. I love being here. I love the city of Annapolis is great. It's literally 10 minutes in that direction. But I thought that our communities deserve better. I still do think that the people in Maryland deserve better than empty suits that go to Congress, mm-hmm. that go to Annapolis. Because like I said before, there's a lot of people that they promise the world and deliver nothing. And I saw that happen firsthand here in Maryland.
I think it's so cool to see, how passionate you are about this because many people might not know this, but Antonio and I used to work together
Yes.
down in Ocean City when we
Yes.
both lived down there.
Buxies.
Yep, Buxies and Dry Dock, and it's just really cool to see how the paths that like people's lives take them down,
Absolutely.
and like even like the people that we worked at that restaurant, like everyone has kind of went in their very own, very distinct directions.
Yeah.
And like it's just so cool to witness people finding their passions and
Yeah.
finding things that they're willing to put their time into, and that's kind of the theme of like this season of podcasts that I'm putting out, this season 2. It's all about people that have had a dream, been able to execute on that, and are becoming closer and closer to like this vision that they wanted to be back at the beginning when it was just a dream. So it's really cool to see, yourself, and whether the election went the way you wanted it to or not. It's like you are so much more involved in the community, and the community knows you, and regardless of if you were elected or you weren't elected, like you have this leg up on a lot of other people who haven't been through that experience, and now like the next time you run, you're going to be able to run through it just as quick and hopefully have better results.
That's one thing we've been saying, like my team and I, we've been talking about our next steps, and we're not going to go public with any next steps for a little bit. I think right now, after being on the campaign trail for over a year,
Relax.
I'm just going to exist for a little bit, be a civilian, and not like, go balls to the wall with it.
Mm-hmm.
But, we really had just a great time. We really did. Like, I think the most rewarding thing out of all of this was that we did things that people didn't expect us to do. We did things, from the beginning, the party and everyone, like the established people, they were all telling us, it's not possible. You're not going to perform well. We had people telling us that I was going to get less than 3% of the vote in the primary election, and we came in on our first campaign, first time candidate, never done this before, and came in and got 22% of the vote.
Congratulations.
Almost, I think it was almost 9,000 people showed up and voted for me. 9,000 people in the community showed up and said, that's the guy that we want to go to Washington. And ultimately, while we didn't prevail, there's something to be said there.
Absolutely. And I think I saw in one of your social media posts that the person that did win only got 35% of the vote.
Less than 35% of the vote. So it's a very split party.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And it's a very uphill. It's a big uphill battle. Like, there was other races around Maryland where the victory for the person who became the nominee for that party, it was decisive. It was like 60%. And to see the vote split so much here in this district, it's kind of crazy, but it also shows me that people are just that vocal about who they want representing them. We don't need another empty suit going to Washington. We don't need someone going to Washington that's going to be shackled to the party. That was me. I was the person who was not going to just tie themselves to the party, do the party's bidding, and just go about it business as usual. So,
do you think that caused some resistance from the party? And do you think because you had that mindset, people in the positions maybe made it more difficult for you to get in?
100%. Like, without a doubt in my mind. I mean, like, I've had people calling me for since the election, really, just shocked that this happened, because they saw the work we were putting in. They saw that we were literally everywhere all the time, that we were out there talking to the community, and to see it just get taken away and handed to someone who, in my opinion, didn't put in nearly half the work that we did.
Mm-hmm.
You can go out there and say anything you want. You can say all the talking points. You can go through the rehearsed talking points of a candidate. But unless you're out there delivering, interfacing with people at their door, like, anybody can send a mailer. Like, I could send a mailer today and be like, hey, I'm running for Congress and next time, and please vote for me, and hope that works.
Right.
And that could work in some situations. People get a mailer and they read it and they do more research. 9 times out of 10, those mailers are going in the trash.
9 times.
You know how I can tell you that? Because I get those mailers and they go right into the trash.
They also go into the trash in my household too.
Yeah, no, I mean it's
not
crazy.
a good way to connect.
But
with people
politics is changing. Everything's becoming more digital.
Yeah.
Everything. Like I said, door knocking is even becoming more difficult, and that's a very traditional way to campaign. That's retail politics 101. You go up, you knock on someone's door, you talk to them for a few minutes. There's a lot of people that were, encouraging us to go out there and wave signs on the highway. And while, yeah, that's fun and it makes for a good picture, you're getting a really low return on that. So there's a lot of people that, they have all of this advice, and we got a lot of unsolicited advice from party officials that wanted us to do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, you guys are outdated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need the new blood to come in, and not just in elected positions, but positions of power within the parties. Not just the Republican Party, the Democrats, like any party. They need to have those fresh faces and new ideas cycling through consistently if we really want change.
Right.
We hear a lot of people talk, oh, we need to change this, we need to change this. Why aren't you guys doing that? Like, why aren't the elected officials doing that? And that's why I encourage everyone. There were a lot of debates that I got into with people, whether it was on social media or in person, about different issues, where I'm like, take it up with your local elected representative. Start local. Those are the people that you can probably deliver a lot of change with, because local politics, local leadership matters. Start there and work your way up. That makes being on the federal level, at least in Congress, it makes the government smaller. It keeps the government off of your back, because everyone at the local level would be doing their jobs, would be doing what they're supposed to be doing and actually being out there in the community. But then the problem is, you get people's names on signs enough, you get them out there in the community, and they run a few times and they become that established career politician. They're just going to continue winning until they get a good challenger.
Right.
I think in this race, for us to go up against the incumbent, John Sarbanes, we could have done things that a candidate has never done against him. Unfortunately, now, with the reality that we're living in, I don't think that's going to happen. I do think John Sarbanes is going to win another term, and we'll just wait and see what happens. But I do think that if we're not nominating the right candidates to take on the incumbent from any party, that incumbent's just going to continue winning.
Right, but it sounds like you put up a good fight. I mean, gaining 22% of the vote when the candidate that won only received 35%. Like, that's a pretty close gap, considering you were projected to only get 3%.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys definitely disrupted the field.
Yeah, I don't discredit that
and
at
took
all.
a lot of votes away from the person who won.
Yeah.
And that's a huge win.
Yeah.
I mean, for this being your first time running, like, you definitely should give you and your entire team in the campaign should give themselves a pat on the back, because, I mean, you guys were a big disruption in the election.
Yeah, dude. And that's one thing I tell everyone, I'm like, yes, we can be upset with what happened, and we can, like, I definitely took a day after the election to just, like, feel bad about it and, and everything like that. But we had a lot of major wins here. Like I've said, like, we did things that established politicians expected us not to do. Knocking on over 10,000 doors. I'm sure there's people whose hair blew off, because they were like, how did this kid just come out of nowhere and just do all of this stuff?
Right.
On a limited budget too. Like they say it takes money to win elections. I disagree with that, because if you're actually out there putting in the time, effort, and energy, you can do things. Like, we just proved that. We don't need to send 13,000 mailers. We don't need to do all that stuff. As long as we're out there in the community talking to voters and engaging with them, it's going to come off more genuine, and people are going to like it better than your typical politician who sends a mailer and doesn't go out.
From this experience, running in the future, or suggestions to anybody outside of this district that wants to run on their own, do you have any suggestions on the specific campaigning side of things that you saw, like things that worked? Like, it sounds like the door knocking definitely had a big impact, but as far as you realizing that a lot of people are more digital now, and especially in like my age range, like the 20 to 30, we're not. A lot of people are in apartments. A lot of people aren't available to go and door knock potentially. Like, what did you see that was a really good way to reach the younger generations, to motivate them to follow you?
I mean, the biggest thing for us was, like, obviously social media. I read a book before the campaign started. It was all about how campaigning is turning digital. Everything is turning into a digital aspect. You're reaching people on their phones, you're reaching them via text message, email, whatever. It's the quickest way to reach people. Like, just having all of your social media blasts go out at the same time, so you're covering your bases, making sure your following is seeing it anywhere they can. But in terms of, like, getting involved and the actual campaign process, I would just encourage everyone that if running for office is something you want to do, just do it. I mean, do it. At the end of the day, it's like, take the unconventional approach. If established politicians are telling you to do something, don't do it. Trust your gut, trust your instincts. Do what you think is going to make you come off as the most genuine candidate, because that's what I had to do, right? I had to look at it and be like, I need to come off in a certain way, because at the end of the day, an election is selling yourself. You're selling yourself to voters saying, hey, this is what I want to do for you. Here's my plan. Here's my elevator pitch, blah, blah, blah. And you run with it. So take the unconventional approach, do things differently. Don't do the typical politician moves. We didn't do that the entire time we were in, and I think it worked out pretty well for us.
Another thing I was curious about is how, like, you have a full-time job, you're a real estate agent, and were you able to maintain your full-time job while you were full-time campaigning as well?
There was a balance. I would divide my days up a little bit, spend a certain time in the morning on real estate stuff, spend a certain time in the evening on campaign stuff, and just try and like balance it out as best as I could. I mean, it's kind of nice because as a real estate agent, I can kind of make my own schedule,
Be flexible,
kind of be as flexible as I can be. But there's times with the campaign where we would start the day out in Carroll County, and we would stop at an event there. We would on the way back in stop at an event in Howard, stop at an event in Montgomery County, stop at an event in Anne Arundel County. So it's consistent with your schedule always being full. So it was hard to balance that out a little bit, but at the end of the day, we made it work. It was just like, I need to do the campaign because I felt drawn into it. At a certain point, I was like, holy shit, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're going to do this, and we're going to go through with this, and we're going to be in this for the long haul. And there even came a point in time where certain people entered the race, and there was an allusion to the fact that I should leave the race for them to prevail. And there had to be a really uncomfortable conversation because I was like, listen, I'm not, like, we just put in so much time, effort, and energy. I'm not going to bow out of the way for somebody else. Sorry.
I would feel the same way.
My thing's like, I'm not going to do that because I believe in every single piece of content that I put out, every single statement, every single post, commentary, whatever. I believe in every single thing I said. Nothing of that was fabricated. We didn't say anything just to get elected. Mm-hmm. Right. And that was the biggest thing. I was like, we've put in time, effort, energy, blood, sweat, and tears to stay in this race. And to not only, if you're asking me to leave the race, clearly we're enough of a threat that we're going to disrupt something.
Exactly.
And that was where I kind of shifted, and I was like, okay, I didn't really want to be the disruptor candidate. I wanted to be the candidate. But if we have to be the disruptor and we have to go in there and just make people uncomfortable that my presence is just there, then we're going to do that. Like, there were so many events that we went to that I know the people that were there didn't like me. They didn't like the type of candidate I was, and they were all from the party. They didn't like me, and you could tell. And I was just kind of like, you know what? I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Right? Like,
not to be threatened.
Exactly. I'm like, you can throw the book at me. Like, there were so many times throughout the campaign where people attempted to derail our campaign, or, better yet, just demoralize our campaign, and kind of make us think, oh, well, there's no hope left. Let's just suspend and we'll end it here. Mm-hmm. And I was like, sorry, we're in this for the long haul. They can throw anything they want at me, but we're not going anywhere because we're already younger. We're a younger campaign. Coming into this, if I would have just bowed out, people would have said I did it for attention,
right?
Or I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't well versed enough in politics to even finish the fight. But we finished the fight and we ran through the tape at the end of it.
Yeah, I think that's a huge accomplishment. Just to be able to stick it out all the way to the end and just show that like you said, you're not to be messed with and you're here for the long run. Do you feel like there was a lot of mind games that other politicians played with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to my previous point about people promising the world and then delivering nothing. Mm. There's a lot of people that, it's crazy because there's a lot of the politicians, like I'm not talking about voters anymore, I'm talking about the politicians here in Maryland. There's events we would go to and they'd be like, hey, I owe you a check, I owe you this, I got to get this to you, I got to get you all this information. Nothing
Never happened.
Never happens.
Yeah.
And then that's what's crazy to me. We see people in elected positions or, in positions of power in our political sphere that say we need young people involved. We really want young people involved. And then a young person like me comes along to run for office and they're like, ooh, not like that.
Too young.
They're like, sit this one out.
Yeah.
And, I just believe that the old way of doing things is over. The wait your turn version of politics is on its way out the door. We've seen it.
I think so too.
We've seen it at least since I would say like 2018, where a lot of people who were not established politicians got elected to public office. And when you read the Constitution and when you read our founding documents, it doesn't say that you need to be a lawyer, a doctor, a celebrity to run for office. You just need to be 25 years old and care about the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Because a lot of times they try to set this up and say, oh, well, what makes you qualified to run for office? And I'm like, well, if we're looking at the constitutional answer of it, I'm over the age of 25. But if we're looking at the answers that you guys want, I guess I'm not, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I don't have 7 degrees. You know what I mean? And that's the unfortunate thing about it. And I think that there's a lot of people, there's so many people that I feel like know they can make a difference in their community, whether they're running for county council, state delegate, or for Congress, that want to make that change, but they know they have to overcome that barrier walking in the door of being like, hey, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, but I am this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
Like my campaign video started with, hi, I'm Antonio Pitocco. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a career politician, but I'm running to represent you in Congress. I think you get a whole new level of care coming from someone who hasn't been in politics.
And connection too, right? Because like people want somebody that they can relate to, and somebody, potentially that's like super, maybe even overeducated, that has all these degrees. The common person that's living and voting, they don't. Even speaking for myself, let me not speak for other people. Like I don't feel like I can connect with that type of person, or maybe I can, but in a general sense, like if it's my buddy, if it's somebody that came from where I'm from and went to a similar school like you did, like that is my guy. Like that's basically a similar version of myself that is somebody that I can really wrap my head around, and like I understand. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Like I understand where this person has came from, and they are just out here trying to make the most of it for the people that are around them.
And that was the most refreshing thing too, was meeting people that I had met through previous jobs, school, or they knew my family. They basically already knew me. They knew that I came from here. They knew that I care about this place. They knew that I wanted to make a change. So that was probably one of the coolest, like I said before, one of the coolest experiences was just meeting so many people. And when you go up to someone's door and you knock on it, and they're talking to the candidate, like there's so many times that we had people be like, oh, you're the candidate? That's awesome. Like I've never had a congressional candidate knock on my door. Or, even during we did the 4th of July parade in Annapolis, we came barreling down the street with this massive truck,
I saw those
signs,
videos.
and everything. And, when people are like, oh, wow, you're the candidate, it's like a breath of fresh air, I feel like, because sometimes the candidates hide themselves away, or they don't go out in the public unless there's time for a photo op or something like that. And I was like, I'm going to go to events, I'm going to go talk to people, I'm going to be out there whether or not a photo op is necessary. Because, again, I'm not only going to care about the issues when it's politically convenient to care about them, I'm going to care about them all the time because they're the issues that we're facing. And there's other people that they just pepper in their commentary with on an issue when it's convenient for them.
Do you feel like you're going to stick with this in the future?
Absolutely. 2024 is only 2 years away.
I wonder if down the line, because I feel like a big section of the voter population is the younger generation, and I can say with utmost certainty that politics is hardly ever, if not never, a conversation. Like in the circles of friends that I have, I can't speak for other people, but I think that my friends and my circle gets so turned off by just the toxicity that we see from like the larger federal political side that gets blasted on social media. And I see that as an issue for sure, because as impactful as our local politicians are to like our day-to-day lives, that's never talked about, that's never promoted, and really, unless I go out of my way to look for it, which typically I don't. I'm just, being honest. Like if I didn't follow you on social media, I really probably wouldn't have even known that this election was going on at the moment. And like, that's my own ignorance. I definitely recognize that, but I also recognize that nobody else, in their 20s that I know has had that as even a thought in their head. So I wonder what can be done to really connect or drive home the importance of paying attention to these elections, because that's a huge sliver of the population that could be voting for you that doesn't even know that they're supposed to.
There was a lot of people that when we door knocked, they were asking us when the election was, and in one instance we were like, it's tomorrow. Like tomorrow's election day.
Yeah.
Get out there and vote.
Crazy.
You know, and it's unfortunate that there's such a lack of involvement in politics. I completely understand why, because politics is draining. You know, the negativity that comes out of it, all of it is so incredibly draining. And, you know, I wish more people cared. You know, and I think a lot of people don't, or they don't go look for the information because they feel like their voices are not being heard by the same people that have been in power for years, if not decades. You know, I talk to a lot of people that are like, why should I even vote if my vote doesn't matter? And I told everyone, I'm like, show up and vote. I don't even care if you're not voting for me, but please go have your voice heard.
Yeah, it
like,
matters.
It affects who's representing us in the governor's mansion. It affects who's representing us in Congress, in the state house, on our county council, on our city council. You know, those, like, having your voice heard in that capacity is super important. You know, and with the survey of the census being done this year, and I think it was over 4 million people reside in the state of Maryland, but I think it was only 500,000 people that showed up to vote in the primary total for both parties. You know, and that was really something disheartening to see, because it's like there's so many people out there who are ignored, forgotten about, left behind by the political process, and their voices are really not being heard at that point. But I mean, I can't blame people to have the thought in their mind of, why should I vote if I'm not going to be listened to?
Mm-hmm. Well, I see it as an issue too, because as the generations now that grew up, you know, really in voting, and I don't really know what those generations are, but like who would be your age range that you see most active in voting and in politics, like paying attention to the conversations?
I mean, it's kind of like an array of people, but I would say a majority of it is like anyone over the age of 50,
right?
Maybe 45.
So my curiosity and concern is, you know, as this generation of people that are involved in the voting system age and continue to age, like, is it a matter of, you know, people my age, when we're 40, when we're 50, will finally be interested in paying attention to that? Or is it a matter of, you know, these people who grew up in the political, paying attention to the political and caring about who's elected, if those people start to, you know, get older and older, and then eventually are no longer with us anymore. I'm sorry to put it like that, but, you know, like, there seems to be a huge separation of the people that are voting, and then, like you just said, the potential pool of people who could be voting but just aren't interested and aren't paying attention to it. And there definitely needs to be some type of action, or just some type of higher education or outreach or something, you know, to get my generation more involved or more caring about these elections.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important. I think more people our age do need to be politically active.
Yeah, and it's odd that, like, these past 2 years of lockdown and protests and people really starting to voice their concerns that are wrong with society, I still don't feel like the people are paying enough attention to the local elections.
Yeah,
like, I think everybody gets caught up with who is president, but not everybody gets caught up with any other field that we can vote for, or really has the understanding of when to vote for them, who to vote for, and what the positions actually mean or can make a difference in the community.
I mean, we went to the Board of Elections on the last few days where they were counting like mail-in ballots, and we were seeing all the ballots come in, and there's a lot of ballots that people just chose not to vote for different races.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they showed up and they voted for governor, and that was it. You know, and part of me is like, every seat is important, every single one. And, you know, you show up at the polling location, you see a sign, you take out your phone, you look up the candidate, you see what they're saying, you see what they're about, and you get to learn about them. I think, and I don't know exactly how to do this, but I think engaging those people, the people who want to have their voices heard, but don't because they don't think their voices are being heard.
Mm-hmm.
Engaging with them is super important. Making sure voter turnout goes up. Making sure that people are actually having their voices heard, because there's a lot of people who can be big, bold, and loud on the internet, but then they're not trying to help for change. You know what I mean? It's the whole like keyboard warrior thing. That's why I was like, well, if I'm going to put a statement out on social media about X, Y, and Z, I'm also going to go out in the community and talk to people about X, Y, and Z. I'm going to attend an event about X, Y, and Z to make sure that I'm as well versed as I can be on the subject or the issue, and I can relay that to the people. It's like I said, it's really sad to see so many people lose faith in the process.
Yeah.
Because this is a process that's only supposed to make our lives easier, better, keep the government off our back, out of our pockets, and help us have our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness free of the government breathing down our necks.
If I can get a little conspiratorial for a second, I'm curious if the lack, because I've really only been educated on government and on politics um, in elementary school. Like that was the only structured education that was given to me. Now I absolutely understand that I could be going online and learning about this myself, and perhaps should be, and that's the solution to this answer. But like as far as these processes being ingrained in us, like math and science are, and something as important as how our country and our states are being run.
Yeah.
You know, you can choose to major in that and be a poli-sci major, and then really get into that. But I'm surprised that the political sector and the way that the branches are run is not more of like a driving required education
You'd
for
think it
people
would be.
growing up. You think it should be?
Yeah, and like, I remember when I was in school, we learned about government and we learned about Congress and the Senate and the presidency and stuff like that. But I would say it was nowhere close to being like talked about enough.
But and like elementary school and middle school is where I remember
Yeah.
learning about that, and like we as little kids are so detached and like far
Yeah.
away from when that stuff is really gonna matter to us, that or even be able to vote for that
Yeah.
matter, you know.
Or even be affected by an issue.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
like you're 6 years old. You're like, okay, I don't taxes,
Yeah.
inflation, like what?
Like it's definitely important to learn at that age and to understand, because like I still remember a lot of the content that was taught to me then, but like I'm so surprised that it's not like a end of high school senior year class, like, hey, you guys are about to go out into the world, this is super important for you to understand.
To learn to just like understand what the issues are. I mean, there's a lot they're not teaching in schools that I think that kids should be learning before they go out into the real world. But I mean, there just needs to be like, I think we need to have voter drives at schools. We need to be getting people registered to vote. And like I said, I don't care if they're voting Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever. As long as they're having their voices heard and they're taking the time to get educated on like a subject or an issue, piece of legislation, a bill, or a candidate.
Yeah.
It's very important to have that happen, because that's how we do better in society.
I agree. I think it's great that you have that thought and like that's your wish, that it's not all like vote for me, and that your larger sense is that a very like egoless statement of like it doesn't matter if you vote for me. It's just like just
ego.
get out.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of people thought it was that ego was built in, but it wasn't.
Well, it's hard.
It was never about me. Like
Yeah.
this was never about me at all. Like I tell everyone all the time, because they heard me refer to the campaign as like our campaign, or I would use the word we, like we're going to do this, because this campaign was never for me. I didn't do this to, prop myself up or to become a celebrity out of this. I did this because I saw flaws in the broken system we have, and I saw the people who helped break that system. Met a lot of them over the last year and a half. These shady people who think they know what's best for Marylanders or for the American people, and they really don't care. That's why, it's funny, as soon as we landed on the slogan, A New Way Forward, I was like, that's it. I was like, that's what we're using. And a lot of people were like, it's different. Like a lot of people, they use so-and-so for America, or, make America great again, stuff like that. I was like, this is a new way forward. I was like, we're breaking norms. We're shattering the mold. Yeah. It's time for us to evolve. It's time for Congress to change. It's time for, term limits was my biggest issue. That was a hill I was ready to die on.
I think it's huge.
Because it's like, the average age of Congress is like 60 something. And I'm like, the younger voting bloc is only getting bigger. It's not getting smaller. And we have all these people in DC that pretend to represent us. They care about the children. You see them on TV, they'll like raise their fists and we care about the kids, the young people. They don't.
Well, and also because the generation and the education of today's like late 20-year-old, early 30-year-old to 40-year-old is I was not alive during this time, so I'm kind of speculating here, but I feel like is so much higher than it was at the time that these 60-year-olds were that age. And
Yeah.
like I think that people, we have 30-year-olds now that are living in New York and building rockets and
Yep.
controlling the stock exchange, but none of those brains are motivated to go into politics for probably a variety of reasons.
Mhm.
But it's like today's 20-year-olds and today's 30-year-olds are so much different and more motivated and more educated just
Yeah.
because, and like not a knock, I hope this doesn't come off as like a knock to the older generations, but there's just so much more access to information now
Yeah.
with social media. It's like we are learning and developing at such like an accelerated rate that there's no reason why we can't flood the political system with like these new fresh minds
Yeah.
that maybe aren't as, I don't want to use the word jaded. I hope that doesn't have like a negative connotation, but people that have just been doing it for so long that
Yeah.
it takes a lot of effort to kind of redirect their way of doing things.
Yeah.
Versus, I think that a lot of my friends, at least, are very open to new ideas and very aware that you can't really get concreted into a specific way,
Yeah.
and are just really open to learning all they can and then
Yeah.
making a decision after that education process. And I like exactly what you've been saying. Like that's super important to get those types of processes into the political system, because I think that'll help to really, really make change based on what people want.
Yeah, I will say like our generation, I mean, we have supercomputers in our pocket
We do.
that we can access information and, learn about a candidate, read about an issue, read about the whatever's going on the news today.
While you're waiting in line.
Yeah, dude, it's so crazy how easily accessible this information is. And there's just that level in some people's minds that say my vote doesn't matter, so why should I show up and vote?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's unfortunate. And like I said before, I don't know what the fix for that is. I don't know how to fix that. But the one thing that we got a lot of feedback on from young people was, we looked into you because you're young. Like whether you're Republican or independent, we all face the same challenges. We just have different ways of getting to the solution. And that's fine. That creates that healthy debate that allows us to discuss the issues and finally arrive at a solution. But I think with how divisive everything is and how, people have just lowered their expectations when it comes to our government, it's going to be hard to build that level of involvement.
Right.
It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be within one election cycle. It's going to be a process to go out to people and say, hey, I'm running for you. I want to help you. I want to make your life easier. I want to help your business prosper. I want to help in this way.
It's so interesting too, though, because our generation is so like obsessed with social media and gaining followers and being like an influencer. But it's odd that doesn't carry over into this political realm, because that's exactly what that is. I mean, obviously it's more of like educated conversations and not just like posting photos that people's brains like. But it's weird that doesn't, and maybe later down the road it could, but it's odd that doesn't translate into the political field, because you're gaining followers. It's more in like the in-person, I guess, but maybe not in today's age. It's very electronic too. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of split. Like there's a lot of people that, they'll get fired up about an issue or something like that during an election, right? Like something will hit the news. It'll be like, oh, they just banned this. They just took this off the shelves. They just did something crazy. And then people get fired up in that moment, and the election's a month away, and bang, 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 they're posting about it on social media. And that's their extent of involvement. I want people to be out there. Like when I see people protesting and stuff like that, I mean, I'm like, yes, have your voices heard in a peaceful capacity, obviously, but like go out there, make a statement, be bold. A lot of people, they like to talk about the silent majority. I'm like, we can't do that anymore. Like we can't be quiet about issues, or we can't expect things to change at that point.
Just delays everything.
Yeah, go out there, write letters to your state delegate, write letters to your state senator and your county council member. Talk to them about the issues. If they're doing a town hall, go talk to them about what you want seen, what you want to have changed in your community. write to your congressman. John Sarbanes, he doesn't answer that much. And when he does, he basically just dances around the question like a career politician would. But having your voice heard is super important to wanting to be involved. That's like, I wrote a letter to John Sarbanes when I was little and he wrote me back. And then, to come back full circle almost 15 years later, I wrote him another letter being like, hey, I'm running against you now. So you didn't know me then, but you will know me now, right? It gets you into that mindset of being like, all right, I'm involved. I'm here to play. I'm here to have the discussions. And then again, like, I feel like people that sit on two sides of the political aisle think that they can't talk to each other because of whatever divisive issue one side has or the other. And my thing's like, no, I want to have those conversations.
As you should.
If it gets uncomfortable, it gets uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, I can better understand your side of the issue and you can better understand my side of the issue. And that's how we, blend in together and actually get to a solution.
I completely agree. And like, that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is because like I enjoy conversations, and if they get sticky, like that's just part of the conversational process. And I think more people need to welcome that and just, be open to having dialogues that might not be exactly, flowers and rainbows throughout the whole conversation. And I think that a lot of people may have lost the skill of having like a respectable conversation around difficult things.
Dude, I remember in college, there were a lot of people that I were friends with in college that I would say were not on the same side of the political spectrum as me. And we did have those, they weren't even arguments. They were just like really impassioned discussions. Like we weren't yelling at each other.
Put it.
Yeah, we weren't screaming at each other. We weren't like calling each other names or whatever, but we were having those discussions, and it actually helped me, in my mind, understand different perspectives, which was crazy because I was just kind of like, I might not agree with what you're saying, but you're right.
Yeah.
Like, I might not agree with how you got there, but, you're correct. Like, we do need to address these issues. And that's one thing I've always left myself very, like, open-minded to opposing opinions, because in politics, you get them a lot. Before it was like, if you agreed with a candidate 60 to 70% of the time, that was going to be the candidate you voted for. But now on both sides of the political spectrum, you've seen the extremes come in, and you have to be 100% with them all the time, or there's no support. And that goes for both sides, all sides, really. If you're not 100% on every single issue, there's going to be a problem. And that's another like bridge we have to cross and be like, hey, we might not agree on everything, but let's find what we do agree on and work from there, right? And you can do that in a primary where you're appealing to your own party, but you can also do that in a general where you're appealing to everyone. Because I've always held the same idea that a good representative doesn't just represent the people that voted for him or her. They represent everyone in the district. Whether 50,000 people showed up to vote for you, or showed up and voted in an election, or 500,000 people showed up and voted for you in an election, you represent all of those people even if they didn't vote for you. Even if they don't have the same letter next to their name, right? That's the problem that we have, and that's the problem that we need to overcome.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, man.
That's beautiful. We're running up on the end of our time here. Is there anything you want to promote that you're working on, or let the people know where they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media. It's Antonio Pitocco, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're just, like I said, we're still trying to figure out our next steps. We're going to get it done. We're excited about the future. We're excited about the next campaign. When that's going to be, I'm not too sure. We're just going to take the next few months to try and figure everything out, get back into the community, get involved, and most importantly, let the people know that we're not going anywhere.
Take a little vacation. You've been working hard. You've been working hard. Probably use a good weekend at the beach.
Dude, I would love it. I would love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode. We will catch you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you, guys.